Imagine reading something. You've read a whole page, and then you get asked questions about what you've just read. It could be a simple thing like a cake recipe, or it could be a more complex thing like an instructional thing of science, and not being able to answer any of those questions. Imagine going your whole life knowing that despite the fact that you've proofread something a gazillion times, when you hand it in to somebody, the chances are it'll always come back and you'll have SP or spelling or check your punctuation. I'm a normal girl. Well, sort of. I'm a unique 21-year-old who likes having adventures, who likes baking, who likes sitting in front of the TV watching Downton, who likes going on a bike ride and having nowhere where they're going and then eventually finding themselves back in the same place. I like driving, I like seeing friends. But what's here isn't affected by dyslexia. Here is. And this is what it's like for me having dyslexia. I was diagnosed at like 16, 17, in fact no, it will have been older than 17, 17 to 18. I went 18 years of my life thinking there is definitely something wrong and I have no idea what it is. And I would always struggle with school or anything like that, and certain aspects of my life I was just like, I'm just hopeless. This isn't good. I knew that there was something not right. And from the age of like 16 onwards, I was like, I reckon I know what this is, until eventually I found out and I was right. I have dyslexia. Dyslexia is characterized, according to Google, by difficulty with learning to read fluently and with accurate comprehension despite normal intelligence. This includes difficulty with phenomenological awareness, phenomenological decoding, processing speed, orthographic coding, auditory short-term memory, language skills / verbal comprehension, and or rapid naming. I have no idea what that means, not gonna lie. If that meant anything to you, great. But to me, I've just read that and I couldn't tell you a single thing. Genuinely, I think I read the word phenomenological in there, but I only remember that because it was impossibly hard to say. And something about intellectual intelligence. I could have read a nursery rhyme to you and I wouldn't have a clue what I'd just read. Now imagine going through uni and having to read a bunch of stuff, bearing in mind you probably have no idea what half of it's about anyway, and then having to write something about it. Like, it's just insane. So here are 5 ways that my dyslexia affects me. Number 1, asking questions. As I've said, if I was told to read something and then pick important bits out of it, it would be impossibly hard for me to do that and would take a long time because my readings is so much slower than everybody else's generally. I can read stuff, no problem. I assume, like I've just read, probably everything was read accurately, but it can take ages for me to actually read it. And then you get asked questions on it just to make it doubly interesting and you can't answer half of them. Fun times. Number 2, language. Even in normal life situations, I'll often be asked questions and I will immediately answer, I don't know. And that's because I haven't been able to process what the question has been. So I'll ask them to say it again, and then I might have an answer. I can't necessarily say the answer though. The best way to describe it is by having a brick wall. Somebody asks you a question, and the first time it doesn't get through the brick wall. Somebody asks you the question again and it may get over the brick wall. you then, despite the fact that you've heard it completely fine, my hearing, there's nothing wrong with that, you then try and answer it. But you know what you want to say, but from here to here, it has to go through the brick wall again. And so you have to try and loosen some bricks so that it can go straight through. And that's why I often will answer a question with, I don't know, because I can say that, and that covers time between trying to actually figure out what I'm trying to say. Number 3. Problems with dyslexia, in my opinion, is spelling. I've always struggled with spelling. And partly maybe that's because reading was so long and so processing, and it took so much time and it took so much energy to read that I didn't read very much, and as a result I didn't read, I couldn't necessarily see what the words looked like, so therefore I wouldn't be able to know how to spell them. That's one way. The other way is that genuinely I just find it very, very difficult to spell stuff. Even having a spell checker on my computer half the time doesn't necessarily make it any easier, because I'll spell something and I'll think it looks right despite the fact that it will actually say collect, and I was trying to say something like coalition. That wasn't a very good example, but those kind of things are really, really hard. Your and your are no, is there only 2 yours? You are, Y-O-U, apostrophe R-E, you are, and then your fruit, I think. Even now, I still struggle with that, and I'm flipping 21. Number 3 or number 4? 3 or 4, I can't remember. I thankfully have been able to get over this sort of thing, but I still struggle with it today. And that is the word bed. Now, I'm sat on my bed right now and I know exactly what a bed is, but try and write the word bed as a dyslexic person is very difficult. Getting letters like B and D, swapping them around, mixing them up is just so common, and it happened to me. I don't even know how my teachers at school would understand what I'd written half the time. Even I can't understand now, looking back and reading it. It's impossible to know. But that's often the common case, and it happened to me. You try and write something and you just whoa, which way am I writing this? Which way does the letter need to face? Does it need to face this way or that way? The hardest part of having dyslexia, for me, isn't having dyslexia. It's how other people expect you to be just as good as everybody else, despite the fact you clearly have something that you can't help you, that doesn't work. So I have a great example of this, and it really shocked me recently when I realised actually what it said. So, at uni, at work, in life, you'll be told to read something on a screen, and despite the fact the lecturers know there are people in the room that have dyslexia and it takes a while for them to read it and process it and be able to actually know what it means, they won't give you enough time. My example is actually while I was on placement. I told my educator I had dyslexia. My feedback was often Laura takes a while to verbally tell us what she means, or will replace it with colloquial language like thingy. I recently was reading this and I got really angry. I was I clearly told you I had dyslexia. I clearly told you, and I remember telling them at the very beginning, if you ask me a question, it will take me a while to respond, and I might not end up saying it in the most professional way. It will take me a while to actually translate it to professional language. I wouldn't say anything inappropriate, but I might end up saying the word thingy when I meant a mocker test. And the only reason I was able to say that just then is because I've filmed this type of bit 3 times practicing. it really bugged me that they then had picked up on that and told me that's where I need to improve. And yeah, I knew inside that's where I needed to improve, but I quite clearly told you at the very beginning, I have dyslexia, bear with me, it's not my fault. I'm not thick, it just takes a while. And your whole life, until you get a diagnosis, and even when you have a diagnosis, as I'm quite clearly proving now, people will still think that you don't quite know what you're saying, or that you aren't very clever, or that they know there's something wrong, but they'll just ignore it and pretend that you're normal. I don't want to be treated any differently, but it's like if you had a scar on your face and somebody told you in feedback that's formal, you need to look better because the scar on your face is putting people off, which by the way should totally be embraced if you ever have a scar on your face. Like, that's like, because it's inside and it's not on the outside, that's the hardest part for me to have dyslexia. Now I know this video may seem like a little bit of a rant, and this video may not have been the most organised thing in the world, and I know some people do struggle with organisation. I am not one of those people. I can be quite organised, but the way that I am managing to be organised is by preparing. And I often will end up filming a video 3 times before I actually put it online, just to make sure that it's not the worst thing in the world. Having any disability is hard. Having a physical disability is sometimes even harder. And I don't want to be seen as a dyslexic person. I don't want to be seen as somebody that, oh, and they need extra help, or oh, we should give them like, let's not give them that task, that's too hard for them. I just want to be seen as me, and to be given the same opportunities as everybody else, which I feel every disabled person will feel like, whether it's a physical or a mental disability. But right now, it often feels sometimes like the world just doesn't understand. And heck, we're in like 2018, almost 2019. Why is it that we still can't understand as a world that we have different people? We need to make allowances in certain areas, like if somebody's blind, we need to help them. If somebody's dyslexic, we need to help them. But it's like writing it in graffiti on a wall for everybody to see, when nobody necessarily needs to be able to have their flaws written down on a wall. Imagine wearing a t-shirt with all of what you think is bad about you on there, and what the world thinks about you on there. Nobody would do that. Having a disability is hard, but I'm not gonna let it stop me. I'm not gonna let it bother me. I'm not gonna let what other people think or do upset me. I'm gonna live my life. I'm gonna have adventures, and I'm gonna enjoy it. And I'm gonna be like, hey, flipping good, OT.